Hey everybody, Jake Alexander here, coming to you with another episode of Cool Shit You Can Deduct. And I'm always excited. So I say that at the beginning of every episode, but today I'm really excited because we have Jack Krupey here. And Jack, we met probably 6 months ago, maybe several months ago at one of our mastermind groups that we're in. And, I want to introduce you here, but then I'm really excited just to kind of hear your story and dive into some really cool topics here. And so you're the host of your own podcast, right? The Alternative Investor Mastermind podcast. Then you're also the principal of JCAM Alternative Investments, which you have this passion to outpace Wall Street, from what I'm gathering here. I know you did a lot of stuff back in the early 2000s with small multifamily real estate. And I think you managed even like billions of institutional money during the actual crisis, the financial crisis of 2008. And so today, I know we're going to talk about this, but you reside in Puerto Rico, which is totally awesome for a number of reasons. One of them being the tax advantages. And so we're going to dive into that. But, today I want to hear about what you spend your time doing. It sounds like you've dedicated yourself to just helping investors with education, investment opportunities, connections, and really what it seems like to me is just like creating wealth without Wall Street. Would you say that that's pretty accurate?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, tell us about it, man. So that's your rock star introduction. I'll kind of hand it over to you. Tell us about yourself, kind of what you got going on, and we'll take it from there. So. Great.
Well, thanks again for having me.
Absolutely.
It's been a pretty crazy 20-year ride in real estate for me. I got into real estate just out of college. I thought I was going to go more into the technology, IT industry, but I graduated during the dot-com crisis. So, and that was sort of the start of the first real estate boom. So I went to Vegas for my 21st birthday and I bought a book on real estate at Hudson News. I saw the money in Vegas and I was playing $5 hand blackjack and my hand was shaking. And
there you go.
Just realized I need to do something else to make money and to kind of build the wealth and lifestyle that I wanted. So bought a book at Hudson News about how to make money in real estate. It was one of those no money down type of books, and called my landlord, who owned a bunch of properties in Rochester, New York. I finished college. I'm from New York, the New York City metro area, New Jersey, but was living in Rochester still, finishing college. And 3 weeks later, I bought a house, no money down. And then another month later, I bought another one. So I kind of lived that infomercial dream from 2001 to 2007.
So wait, it says you're 21 years old, you're in Vegas, you pick up this book and you actually implement it. The thing you said that stuck out the most is you called somebody who did you have a business relationship with them before, or was this kind of just like, hey man, I want to learn,
Yeah, it was just our landlord. Yeah, we hadn't really talked any business other than when the rent was due, and
right.
It turned out he was he had about 18 properties himself, and he was also a broker, so it was perfect. And I've never been shy. I've always been a connector, so I had no problem reaching out and just looking to see if he could help me or if he knew someone else who could. So, I think the tip for everyone is that you don't hesitate to reach out and network. People generally want to find ways to help each other and work together.
That's such a strong message. And I'm sure you get it, but after you get to a certain point of success and people are always like, what's the secret? Like, how'd you do it? And it's like, I just asked the right people, the right questions, and I wasn't shy. I said what I wanted. I threw it out there. So man, to start, I love that. I could talk about that for the whole time here, but I'll let you keep going. So
that's awesome. So after during the financial crisis, things just froze, and I wanted to get back down towards New York. I always wanted to live in New York City, and it turns out there was a private equity fund that was buying large portfolios of non-performing mortgages, and they needed real estate people. They needed people who had done short sales, who had bought REOs, who had flipped houses, to work on the banking side, just to handle the flow of foreclosures and just to really represent the fund in the bank to make sure they weren't going to get ripped off by the sharks trying to buy by foreclosures. So was able to back into Wall Street at in my late 20s, and during November 2008, I was literally working on Wall Street during the height of the financial crisis. It was a pretty crazy time, and learned a ton, and was really at the beginning of the whole non-performing loan industry, and was left the first firm I was at and then partnered with a small family office. And then in 2014, we partnered with a private equity fund, and over the course of the next 5 years, bought over $3 billion in loans. We worked with Goldman Sachs. We bought from Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac directly. And, it was an amazing ride, but I went from being my own boss and an entrepreneur to being part of a larger firm, and, lost some of that lifestyle and the flexibility that you have as an entrepreneur. And the other thing was, I was now in New York City with a high W-2 income, a Wall Street type bonus, and was paying 50% plus in taxes when you factor in the New York State, New York City, and
it's getting slaughtered.
Yeah. And it was a big wake up call for me. That on top of just the expensive lifestyle in New York City. I started to just get very frustrated, and I was making more money than I ever had, but really just wasn't happy. And there was really not a path to get out, to get out of the rat race, just staying there, because you lose between the taxes and the high cost of living. Just wasn't really saving that type of money. So I'd been investing in multifamily as just one of the more tax efficient ways to invest. So I was a passive investor in a number of multifamily deals. And I knew a few people that had moved to Puerto Rico, and in end of 2018, was able to make a deal where I left as an employee, but I still owned a piece of the business. So I moved down to Puerto Rico, and eventually, once my non-compete was up, I started consulting for another group. And in Puerto Rico, you only pay 4% tax rate on any money that's through export services. So any money you make off island in general, whether it's fund management, consulting, you only pay a 4% tax rate, and there's no 4%. Federal income tax.
Like 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4%.
Correct.
That's awesome.
And there's also no short-term or long-term capital gains through. It's now they've combined these acts under what's called Act 60. So if you're a stock trader, there's a lot of crypto people down here. No short-term capital gains is incredible for those that trade stocks or crypto. I mean, that's life-changing for any active traders. Yeah,
that's great.
So was able to basically get out of the New York rat race, and now I live in an island paradise. And it's the other cool thing is there's about 10,000 of us who've come down that are had some level of success, and also have the mindset and the sense of adventure to actually do this. So the community down here is pretty incredible.
That's awesome. So there's a few rules, right? Like you have to actually live there. It's funny too, because when we met, I was like, you're actually living this. I'm familiar with the Internal Revenue Code sections that allow this and everything, but you're actually living it, which is why I wanted to bring you on here. And so tell us a little bit about the restrictions, because clients will bring this up from time to time, and you have to actually do it. You can't, fly there once a month and those sort of things like.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's a few different rules, but in general, you need to be here at least 183 days. And you need to pass the closer connection test. So you can't have your wife, your kids, and your dog in, the States, and you get on a plane 4 days a week and say you're here 183 days. You do need to be here a majority of the time. That doesn't mean that you can't spend some time in the States. I mean, I travel to masterminds regularly. And then there's a 3-year rule as well. So if you've been here a few years, you can average the 3 years. So if something happens, if you have, a medical issue, there's certainly exceptions, but I mean, in general, you do need to move here. That's the key. There's no, and maybe you get away with it for a couple of years, but if you get audited, it has to pass the smell test. And what I found is once you're here, you'll love it.
You don't want to go
a
back, right?
block. Exactly. I live a block from the beach. I could play beach volleyball. There's a beach volleyball club on Saturdays that meets, and we're all terrible. Most of us are terrible, so but it's good exercise.
I'm coming to visit, man. I've only seen you in the States, actually. Now that I think about it, it's like I got to get down there and check this out.
Yeah. And I'm not the biggest outdoorsman, but there's a lot of hiking. There's actually the only rainforest in North America is here. So this is almost it's very similar weather to Hawaii, and there's a rainforest here. And if you're into golf, if you're into sort of architecture in Old San Juan, it's really 2 or 3 vacations in one here. So
that's incredible.
Strongly encourage everyone to look at it. And real estate wise, I do a little bit of hard money lending down here, but most of my business is still focused on our fund of funds in the States. But there's a lot of opportunities, and almost the entire island is an opportunity zone here.
Wow, that's great. And so what about people who inquire, and I'm not sure how knowledgeable you are on it, but if they want to move their business there, is that something people are doing, or is it really just more from your personal, residence standpoint?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So Act 60, that 4% tax rate has lured a lot of companies here. Anything that can be done remotely will generally qualify, whether it's consulting, fund management. There's a fair amount of e-commerce, internet marketing people here. John Dumas, Entrepreneur on Fire podcast, he's down here.
Cool.
And a lot of the newsletter guys like Peter Schiff is down here, John Malden, Harry Dent. So any business that's not like a brick and mortar storefront where you really need to be there can be moved here. And there's a lot of ways to structure things. If you have a simple consulting business, it's usually pretty easy. But if you have an established business that has a valuation, you would need to hire somebody like you to do a transfer pricing study and really set it up the right way. But it's one of the most amazing opportunities available to U.S. citizens, because if you moved abroad, you can only save $104,000 through the foreign earned income exemption, whereas Puerto Rico, there's people saving millions. So it's an amazing opportunity, and it's under what's called Act 60. And there's a I don't know if they're a nonprofit, but there's an organization called PR Relocate that they receive some government incentives to promote. So they'll actually provide a lot of free resources to those that are interested.
That's great.
Sam Silverman's one of the guys that runs it, and I know him personally. So if anyone's interested, I think PR Relocate is one of the best, at least initial resources to review potential opportunities down here.
That's phenomenal, man. Thank you so much for that. And so now you spend your days playing not so good volleyball, it sounds like. And then what else? You're still managing your fund, right?
Yeah. So when I moved down here, and then eventually I ended up getting bought out. So I had a pretty sizable liquidity event, at least for me, and needed to figure out what I was going to do. And I'd been investing heavily in multifamily just passively. And some of the groups I'd been investing with, had let me know that they're always looking for partners to help raise money, because when you find a 200 unit apartment building and you have 30 to 45 days to raise $5 to $10 million, it's a lot of money, and it's a lot of coordination. So I was already investing a lot of my own money, and I decided to create a fund around my personal investing. And what I found is when you're investing slightly larger dollar sizes, you can get better deal terms than, say, someone who's just putting in 50,000 or 100,000. So I created a diversified fund so that investors could invest alongside of us. And if you're a typical investor who's got maybe most of your money's in stocks and more traditional, but you're going to budget a few $100,000 to invest into passive real estate, it's tough to decide. Do you want to be in Dallas? Do you want to be in Fort Lauderdale? Do you want to be in Jacksonville? And I wanted to provide an opportunity for those to have exposure to all those markets without having to pick and choose one market or one sponsor. So we created essentially a fund of funds that our first fund was in over 30 different multifamily buildings, along with a few ground up construction projects. So it was a really diversified private fund, and generates solid mid-teens plus returns. And one of the biggest benefits is the depreciation. And that's how
I love depreciation.
Yeah. It was game changing. I got a little bit of it when I was in the early 2000s when I just got into real estate, but that was more traditional single family where it was depreciated over 27 and a half years.
Yep.
these multifamily deals, once you're in a 100, 200 unit building, you can do what's called a cost segregation study, and you hire an engineering firm to look at, okay, the roof has 7 years of life left. The cabinets maybe have 5, the heating, the air conditioning. And it usually works out to about 25 to 30% of the value can be taken as a deduction the first year. And
that's incredible. So 25% of the value of the whole complex?
Of the whole complex, yes. And when you're borrowing 65, 70% of the money anyway, it often works out to close to 100% deduction the first year.
That's exactly what I was going to ask. So even though you're not paying cash for this complex, right? You're financing it. So you're putting it down payment, but you still get this massive tax deduction within the first year, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Then this is the last year of bonus depreciation where you can take all of it the first year. So it's a very, very opportune time to, to do some tax planning before the end of 2022. And it's amazing for those that have other passive income. It's probably the highest return you can make, because you could theoretically save between 37 and 50% this year on taxes. So that is the highest potential return on investment you could have that's locked in if you can use the deductions properly.
That's incredible. And so these deductions, right? This is a passive investment, so it can offset other passive income, right? But not active income, not W-2 or business income. Is that right?
Yeah. That's unfortunately, I think they closed that loophole in 1986. So if you're a high W-2,
that one a while ago,
Yeah. Now, however, I've started doing some oil and gas investing as well, purposely because I have some friends and clients that have high W-2. Oil and gas investing, you can still offset your active income. So that was a pretty incredible, that loophole has never been closed. And, I think with what's going on in the world, it's probably going to continue. I think more than ever, the US needs to be energy independent. So
absolutely.
It's something, I'm not a professional in oil and gas by any means, but I tested the waters personally, and I've got a great group that I feel pretty comfortable with a great track record. So myself and a few clients have actually dove in and invested in some oil and gas wells that are performing extremely well. Thank you, Putin. The only time you'll catch me saying thank you, Putin, but oil prices skyrocketed this year because of just what's going on in the world.
Yeah, some crazy stuff going on in the world, but this is awesome, man. It's like, to me, I just, and not to go back to the beginning, but kind of like one of the first things he said is like, I'm this young 21-year-old kid. I don't really know what I want to do, but I'm not, fulfilled. So you picked up this book and you took action, and you called somebody who you didn't even really know as your landlord, right? But you're just thinking like, this guy owns this house, maybe he can help me or whatever. And then, fast forward is however many decades later, look at you now. You're obviously very successful, and you're doing things to help other people, which I think is phenomenal. To me, it's just like, that mindset of I'm going to figure this out. Like, I'm just going to I'm just going to start doing things. Like, I love that, So, not to get too far off of the concept of taxes, but could you talk about that a little bit? Of just like, because to me, it's so important, kind of like I was saying too, I'm sure you get it, these questions all the time. Like, how'd you do it? What's the secret? And it's like, I'm not that smart. Like I'm not, I'm not some genius that just had this well-laid plan, or, some trust fund baby who had it all figured out. I was tenacious. I figured the things out along the way, so like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I think some of it was natural. I'm a natural connector. I enjoy learning. I'll go down rabbit holes, whether it was Bigger Pockets, The Creative Investor, which is a forum from back in the day. Now it's like, you can go down YouTube rabbit holes, just diving in to learn about things. And I always loved talking money, talking investing, finding interesting, loopholes, angles. And when I was waiting out my non-compete and, trying to figure out what I was going to do next after I left New York, I had a lot of time where I was thinking, like, what do I want to spend my time doing? And I love masterminding with investors. I'd never been able to take outside money when I was in New York. It was all big pension funds. And, I realized that, I love being an investor in deals, but I'm kind of past the stage in my life where I want to be, the operator that's getting the 2 a.m. phone call for, a leaky toilet or something, an issue. So,
yeah,
I realized just, and I've taken a number of those personality profiles, that I'm not like the super detail grinding, micromanage, push guy. I'm the connector, the sales guy, connector is really the key word. I think that's like that's one of those Malcolm Gladwell books. And, I've always enjoyed that. And, really tried to focus what my daily activities on, what my strengths are, and not my weaknesses. And this is a debate I have with my wife, because she kind of likes to she's more of a grinder and wants to challenge herself, and even things she's not good at, she wants to get better. And I'm just focus on what you're good at, and, find partners for the rest.
Yep. So, somebody said, just on that point, I had Darren Jacklin on the show a few months ago, and he said something that was like, I've thought of it several times since then. He said, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And a lot of people, they get into, troubles or problems or issues in their business, and they're like, I got to figure it out. And he's like, no, just think of in your phone. He's like, you have thousands of contacts. Think of who can help you. And just since a few months ago, I've used that several times. It's like, I don't need to know how to do this particularly. I just need to find somebody who does, and they can help us out. That was a real powerful message, Yeah,
absolutely. I think one of my other mentors had mentioned, I think, a Dan Sullivan book, Who Not How. And, very similar concept.
Yeah, that's incredible, man. I love that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. So it's, it's fun to network with people. We have a couple of informal networks here in Puerto Rico. The masterminds that we're part of. It's really, it's just great to get out and take a few days away from the office to meet tons of other like-minded entrepreneurs. And,
oh, absolutely.
Never stop learning. And, it's given me some of what I've picked up in the last 6 months to a year is really on the marketing side. For a number of years in New York, I mean, I had a LinkedIn account, but I wasn't really building my own brand. I was building the company's brand, and I've had to, really kind of relearn how to, how to market. And it's a different world than it was 10 years ago, where you could just put up a website, and now it's podcasting, it's posting on, Facebook and Instagram, or, maybe TikTok. I used to think we're too old for TikTok, but I think it's gaining more and more market share. And
it is. There, you find some interesting stuff on TikTok, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So before I forget, on the depreciation side, I think I want to do a little deeper dive, because it's the type of conversation I have regularly, and I'm sure you do with many of your people as well.
Absolutely.
And I think the tax codes seem to have been written for entrepreneurs more so than W-2. So there's so many
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. But some of the interesting things I've seen is, spouses. If one spouse qualifies as a real estate professional, then everything is blended together. So you could be a surgeon making $2 million a year, but if your wife is a real estate professional, and that could be either a broker or have, I believe it's 750 hours a year in active rental property activities, then you can basically take all of the write-offs as active.
And they don't get capped at the 25,000 mark and then get rolled over for exceeding the income threshold as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. And, for people that are in that position that are higher net worth, I mean, in some cases, would probably be better to have the spouse quit their job and just, buy a couple properties than to, than just to work. So if they don't, I think as you're looking at planning your life, if one of the spouses doesn't like their job, there's a better way to do it. And it can save hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I also, at a recent conference, someone told me about another loophole on the short-term rental market, which I wasn't aware of till recently. That
Tell us.
Short-term rentals through Airbnb do not have the passive loss limits, as long as the person running the short-term rental is, I think, spending 100 hours a year and is spending more time than anyone else at that property. I ran into a few tech people in Silicon Valley that had full-time jobs making hundreds of thousands a year, but once a year they buy an Airbnb and they run it themselves. It doesn't take that much of their time. And is that something that any of your clients have used in the past?
So that particular rule I'm not familiar with. I know there's been a lot of, I don't say controversy, but back and forth of, do short-term rentals go on, and not to get like too technical, but do they go on Schedule E, like a typical rental property? They go on Schedule C, which is incurs self-employment tax. And so now there's new regulations where they're not having to be reported on a Schedule C, so they're not incurring the self-employment tax. But I'd be real interested to learn more about what you're talking about there, actually, too, because that's what kills people. We've got a number of clients, I mean, tons of clients, but, a couple that I can think of are actually good friends of mine I've known for years and years. And, these guys have W-2 jobs where they're kind of like you said, like they're making a killing, they're making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, and they're paying $200,000 a year in taxes, and one of them's got, I don't know how many, half a dozen, maybe a dozen by now, rental properties where the losses are just suspended. So it's like, it's not helping you. Like you have to figure out how to use the tax code, and use is bad, but like utilize the tax code for what it's written for. It's like, you're an employee. That is the worst, and you're also an investor on the side. But until we do something here, like you got to start a business. Like we need to get you qualified as a real estate professional. So, that stuff, you can actually take advantage of it. So it's funny you say that. We see that kind of stuff all the time,
Yeah, I have a friend who's an anesthesiologist and he's single, and he meets with a doctor. He's like, he's actually like actively trying to, he wants to find a wife that's a real estate professional.
Yeah, it would make a massive difference, so that's too funny.
Yeah. So, it's interesting times right now. I've had, a few investors just, talk about where we are in the market as well. And, regardless of if the market drops a few percent, if there's any sort of recession or real estate, the tax efficiency of these deals, is probably the highest return you can make. Because even if you're carrying forward the deductions, you're getting income that is actually tax deferred. And many financial advisors and planners don't really, they're just in their silo. They don't really take everything into account. I've seen a number of high net worth investors that have a lot of REITs in their stock portfolio. And since REITs don't get taxed first at the entity level, it all passes through. They're not qualified dividends like Apple is. Apple will be taxed at 15% as a qualified dividend. Whereas many of the REITs, you end up paying that 29.5% on dividend taxes. Whereas through private funds, you're often getting your entire distribution tax deferred, and then you only pay tax when the building ultimately sells in 5 to, however many years. And then you could always reinvest and get new depreciation into new investments. So
absolutely,
many people basically, don't end up having to pay taxes until eventually, and they end up in the estate eventually.
There you go. Well, and you said it earlier.
Also the refinance.
Exactly. Well, you said it earlier. It's about tax planning, right? It's about thinking 4, 5, 10 years out on this kind of stuff. And, where we see, because we do tax planning for our clients, and where we see it get really powerful is when they're thinking down the road. And then, like you said, they're investing in these projects that, maybe right now isn't giving you this, massive return or massive savings, but when the project sells, in 5 years, you don't have to pay taxes on any of the gains. Like that's going to be incredible, and what other things can we implement in the meantime? So we start to layer the deductions on top of each other, and it's makes a massive difference at the end of the day,
Yeah, it definitely does. And, this is maybe slightly off color, but since the name of the podcast is Cool Shit You Can Deduct, throw
it out.
I'm going to quote a saying, procrastination is like masturbation. In the end, you're only screwing yourself.
I love that. There you go.
You need to start tax planning, as soon as possible and look 5 or 10 years out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the other, we're talking a lot about depreciation, but there is recapture. So one of the scenarios is refi till you die. Essentially, if you pull out cash out refis, it's tax free.
Yeah.
But there is recapture. But a lot of our investors that are in their 50s that probably have a number of years in their peak earning, but are going to try to slow down in future years. So you do take the deduction, and when the buildings eventually sell, there is a recapture, but recapture is at whatever the ordinary income rate is for you at the time. So if you're, someone is in their 50s that's making a few $100,000 a year or more, and you have these massive losses piled up, when there is recapture, you might be recapturing at a 12% tax bracket instead of the 37 or the 50. So it's also, it's banking the losses and deferring as much as possible while you're in the highest tax bracket. And then when you have to take, if you take some of it, or if you cannot reinvest and get new depreciation, if it's recaptured at 12%, that's a major win. And that was a big part of my strategy when I sold my business. Was I was able to defer almost all of the taxes through the passive losses. And when they do recapture, it'll be a few, it might be 50,000 one year, 100,000 one year, as opposed to,
well, it's a fraction of the actual savings that you got over the years,
Yeah, absolutely. And then for the stateside people, there's, solo 401ks, there's defined benefit plans. There are, for those that have more, businesses that have active income, there are a lot of overall strategies. So depreciation, proper, efficient use of retirement accounts, defined benefit plans as needed. All three of those are really the pillars of, I think, just efficient tax investing.
Absolutely. Did you know with a solo 401k plan, if your spouse is an employee in the company, you can actually contribute for them too. So you can put over 6 figures in these accounts every year. It's incredible stuff that, we're amazed that I love having people like yourself on here. Cause you could be the expert here. You're very well versed on this stuff, and you're obviously living it and promoting it, which is incredible. But it just blows my mind how many people just don't know about this stuff. And they, I guess in one way it's a good thing, but it could be a hindrance for them down the road. Is it's crazy to me how many people just kind of put their head down, go earn a ton of money, but they have no strategy for how they're going to save it or preserve it or, pass it on to the next generation without taking this stuff into account. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think, some of that's just sort of the financial advising industry, and they spend a lot of time on marketing. They really tried to, convince people to sort of, put money
let
in
your
index
401k
funds
build up, and Social Security. And it's that's not gonna cut it, man. So
yeah. And ever since, 2012, I believe it was the Jobs Act that allowed for more access to alternative investments. Before that, you could do a Regulation D, but 506B, but you weren't really allowed to advertise. You had to have a pre-existing relationship. So these were, what I call country club deals. Now with the new, new rules, you're allowed to market. So that's really opening up these alternative investments to the mass market. And you've got some of the large companies like CrowdStreet or Realty Mogul that are, kind of multi-$100 million companies that have huge marketing budgets. But there's a lot of smaller private deals out there that often have significantly better returns, whether it's multifamily apartments, mobile homes, self-storage, senior living. And, I think most investors don't have nearly enough exposure to these private type real estate asset classes that are, largely not correlated to the stock market.
Yeah.
And, there's still a housing shortage. I often get questions about where we are in the economy with interest rates going up. And, I still think there's tons of money to be made in real estate, and it's safer. In many cases, it's safer than the stock market just because it's not correlated. The prices are not
going anywhere. The building's not going anywhere, and people are always going to need somewhere to live, right?
Exactly. And there's also, there's a major shortage in workforce housing. A lot of what we're involved in is what I'd call Class B. And these are buildings that, in general, were built in the 70s or 80s, and you cannot build them at the cost that you're buying them at. We had a recent deal. One of the most recent deals we invested in was a 94 unit in Fort Lauderdale. It was $207,000 per unit. The average new construction in Fort Lauderdale to build anything profitable is over $400,000 per unit.
Wow.
So it's very difficult unless you're getting some government money or some type of major tax incentives. It's almost impossible to build workforce housing, middle-class housing. Most of the buildings are kind of higher end luxury type buildings. So that's an area I just feel is very defensive. And, often these buildings, especially if they were owned by somebody who's, had it for a long time, a lot of times when an apartment goes vacant, they'll just throw a coat of paint on it and just re-rent it. However, if you're putting in new kitchens, new bathrooms, there's not a lot of newly renovated units in that workforce housing space. So you can often generate $300 to $500 higher rent just by putting in 5,000 to 7,000 in renovations, kitchen, bathrooms, and flooring. And these buildings are trading at maybe a 4 to 5% cap rate. So when you do the math, if you could raise your rent by $5,000 a year, you can multiply that by 20, and you're raising the value for every 5,000 you're raising rent. You're actually increasing the value of the building by 100,000.
That's incredible. So don't get thrown off by this lower cap rate up front. Think of the long-term potential. And from a minimal investment, it sounds like you could highly increase that.
Yeah. And then we're also, then you're not banking on inflation. Although that's actually, in general, real estate is a good hedge against inflation, but you're creating the value yourself. We're creating the value through, we're not banking on just the market increasing in value. We're forcing the value up. So that's a very defensive strategy. And I guess a tip for as people are looking for where to invest is invest places where you're creating the value, as opposed to just gambling that prices will go up.
I like that. So go create the value yourself. Don't just rely on it being there and taking over this investment. That's awesome.
Yeah. And we look at that across the board. So with multifamily, it's renovating apartments, self-storage investing. In some cases, it's adding climate control instead of all the units just being standard garages. If some of them have, so heating, air conditioning, climate control, there's certain things that need to be stored at certain temperatures. You're not gonna leave wine in just a standard self-storage unit. You want to have like a more of a wine cellar or something that's has electricity and it's going to stay at 68 degrees or whatever wine is stored at. In some cases, it's adding a new building. A lot of these self-storage properties have extra space, and you could build another 50 or 100 units attached to where the building is. Often it's adding U-Haul or other services that clients could use. And these are all things that our typical partners are doing that, are sophisticated operators. And many of the properties being bought are just bought from people who, knew what they were doing, but they weren't as aggressive. They were kind of running it like a family business and not like a well-oiled corporate machine. So we're seeing that across the board. It's sort of you've seen to some extent Wall Street start coming into markets that were typically mom and pop. And that's to some extent happening across most asset classes now, where people who've owned things since the 70s or 80s and sort of, just did it themselves are now being replaced by well-oiled corporate machines. Absolutely.
Jack, I can't thank you enough, man. This is, obviously you're very intelligent. You're very well versed on this stuff. We're gonna probably bring it in for a landing here in the next few minutes, but how can we help you? Are you guys actively looking for investors in a fund, or what can we here at the show and all our listeners, what can we do to help you?
We actually have two funds at the moment. We have one fund that's fully diversified, and it's called the JCAM Diversified Real Estate Fund. We're on our second fund at this point. Our first fund closed last March. And we also have a separate fund it's a pretty cool new technology concept where it's one fund, but it runs more like a brokerage account or a crowdfunding platform where you can pick and choose which deals to be in with us. You don't have to be in everything. So we just had a project in Fort Lauderdale. We have a project in Jacksonville, and it's one platform, but we have at least one deal a month, and investors can pick and choose how they allocate their money. They could be in only one deal, or they can, as every deal comes up, they could add additional money to every deal. And so we have the best of both worlds. We're just looking to network and meet with as many investors as possible to see if we might be a fit. I love to have one-on-one. I'm not an official tax advisor or financial advisor, but I am living it myself. So
you know the stuff, man. This is why I wanted you to come on here. I was like, this guy is actually living it. This is awesome.
Yeah, and that's to me the best. Sometimes that's the best advice because until you've had to write the check yourself, it's there's a level of motivation to learn as much about every loophole, and then go to guys like you to make sure you keep us out of trouble because I don't look good in orange. So
there you go. None of us
yeah.
do, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, it's jcaminvestments.com. We do have a newsletter. We're launching our own podcast called The Alternative Investor Mastermind. So I just encourage everyone to just go to the website and get on our mailing list, reach out, and we'd love to meet investors, hear their story, and see if there's ways we may be able to help. Whether it's through our fund or, as I said, I've referred people to oil and gas deals because it's going to help them with their active income too. So I like to just take a holistic approach to our investors' full picture, and just be kind of a part of their, a friend and mentor and part of people's teams as far as their overall financial picture.
So awesome. So jcaminvestments.com, Jack Krupey, once again, I can't thank you enough. If you're looking to invest, if you just, kind of want to throw some ideas out there, somebody who's actually living it, somebody who's actually doing it, every day in their personal life, or kind of like you said earlier, if you want to play some horrible beach volleyball down in Puerto Rico, I'm sure you'd be open for that too, and have some fun. So once again, everybody, I'm Jake Alexander, Cool Shit You Can Deduct Show. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, if you enjoyed this show as much as we did, go ahead and like and comment below, ring that bell, and put in those comments. Tell us what your favorite part of today's show was. Can't thank you enough. We appreciate you being part of our group here. So thank you so much.